Kang-soo Park learned 3 things from his father's death. Power demands everything, love costs more, and choosing between them means losing either way. Pause. He was wrong about that last part. The night Jane Mitchell's name appeared on a Yakuza surveillance report, Kang-soo understood that the real cost wasn't choosing between power and love, it was discovering which one he'd been afraid of all along. This is the story of what happens when Seoul's most dangerous man stops protecting his reputation and starts protecting something that can actually bleed. Slow breath. In his world, that decision doesn't start wars. It ends them. But first, it destroys everything he thought he knew about survival. The hospital corridor smelled like disinfectant and dying flowers, and Kang-soo Park stood outside room 304 knowing he'd already made the wrong choice. Not about coming here. He'd done that for 15 years every Thursday at 9 p.m. when his mother's treatments left her too weak to pretend she wasn't afraid of dying alone. The wrong choice was simpler, more catastrophic. He'd let Jane Mitchell see him. Not the version he showed his men. Not the cold mathematics that ran shipping routes and laundering fronts across 3 districts. He let her see the part of him that still flinched when his mother coughed blood into a tissue. The part that remembered being 11 years old and watching his father choose power over everything else. Minho stood 5 feet back, hands folded, waiting. His second-in-command never questioned him directly. Didn't need to. The silence itself was a question. "She's leaving in 10 minutes, Kang-soo said. "Make sure no one follows her home." "Which home?" Minho's voice carried no inflection. "The apartment in Gangnam or the one she actually lives in?" Before we start, don't forget to subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It helps us connect with our amazing community, and believe me, the story you're about to hear could happen to anyone. Kang-soo's jaw tightened, so Minho had been watching longer than he'd admitted. Smart, dangerous. Exactly why he'd promoted him 6 years ago, and exactly why that same intelligence now felt like a blade pressed against his spine. "The one in Seodaemon." "You understand what it means," Minho said quietly. "That I had to ask." Kang-soo turned, looked at him fully. Minho's expression hadn't changed. Still calm, still respectful, but something in his posture had shifted. Weight redistributed. Ready. Pause. Say it clearly. "Your enemies know her name now." Minho's eyes didn't drop. They know her schedule, her route to work, the cafe where she buys coffee at 6 a.m. before her shift. He paused. They know because we weren't careful. Because you weren't careful. And now they're deciding whether she's a weakness or just noise. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily. "How long have the Yakuza been watching?" 3 weeks. Maybe 4. Minho's voice stayed level. "They haven't moved yet. That's what worries me." Kang-soo felt something cold settle in his chest, the same feeling he'd had at 19 when he'd inherited an empire he hadn't asked for and enemies who'd been waiting for him to show weakness ever since. His father had taught him exactly one useful thing before the cancer took him. In their world, love wasn't just dangerous, it was disqualifying. The door to 304 opened. Jane stepped out, still in her scrubs, hair pulled back, exhaustion evident in the way she moved. She saw him, and something in her expression softened. Not submission, not fear, recognition. Like she could see through the expensive suit and the reputation and the blood on his hands to something smaller, more honest. She walked toward him. Minho didn't move, but Kang-soo felt him watching. "Your mother's asking for you," Jane said. Then, quieter, "She wants to talk about tomorrow." There was no tomorrow. They both knew it. His mother had maybe a week, maybe less. And she'd spent the last month trying to engineer something she called a real conversation between them, as if 15 years of running an organization built on violence and silence could be undone with honesty. "I'll go in." He didn't move. Jane studied him. She had this way of looking at people. Nurse's instinct, maybe, that made lying feel impossible. She knows about us. Minho's silence changed texture, became sharper. She guessed. Jane corrected herself. Or maybe I'm obvious. But she asked me directly yesterday, and I didn't lie to her. Kang-soo felt the ground shift. Not because his mother knew she'd probably known before he did, but because Jane had times confirmed, times it, had made it real. Had taken something private and unspoken, and turned it into a fact that could be used, weaponized, leveraged. "We'll talk later," he said. "Will we?" Jane's voice carried no accusation, just the simple weight of someone who'd learned to recognize evasion in dying patients and their families. "Because it feels like you've been preparing to disappear for the last 2 weeks." She was right. He had been. Every conversation carefully distant, every meeting shortened, every moment together shaped to feel more like an ending than a continuation. Protection, he told himself. Necessity. Cowardice, her eyes said now. "Miss Mitchell," Minho's voice cut in. Polite and absolute. "Mr. Park's mother is waiting." Jane held Kang-soo's gaze 1 second longer, then nodded and walked past them toward the elevator. She didn't look back. The moment she disappeared around the corner, Minho spoke. "They'll move soon, you know that." "I know. And you're going to let them." Kang-soo turned toward room 304. His mother would be sitting up in bed, oxygen tube in place, that terrible knowing expression on her face. She'd probably planned this entire confrontation, probably asked Jane to tell him. His mother had always understood strategy better than his father ever did. She just chose to apply it to his emotional survival instead of territorial expansion. "I'm going to end this," Kang-soo said. "Cleanly. By removing the vulnerability. By making the right choice." Minho's silence said everything. They both knew what the right choice meant in their world. They both knew Kang-soo had never hesitated before. But they also both knew. Voice tightens. That this time, he was lying. The meeting was scheduled for midnight in a restaurant that hadn't served food to actual customers in 6 years. Kang-soo arrived alone, which was itself a message. No guards, no Minho, no visible demonstration of power. Just him in a dark suit, walking through rain-slicked streets in Itaewon where neon reflected off puddles and made everything look like it was bleeding light. Inside, Takeshi Yamamoto sat at a corner table, cigarette smoke rising in thin lines toward the ceiling. Mid-50s, expensively dressed, the kind of man who'd built his reputation on knowing when to wait and when to burn everything down. The Yakuza's representative in Seoul. The reason 3 of Kang-soo's laundering operations had gone quiet in the last month. "You came yourself." Yamamoto's Korean was perfect, accent barely noticeable. Interesting. Kang-soo sat across from him. Didn't order anything. The restaurant's owner, really just someone who kept the lights on and the doors locked, disappeared into the back. "You asked for a conversation. I'm here. I asked for a concession." Yamamoto tapped ash into a crystal tray. "There's a difference." The favor had come through official channels 2 days ago. A request to move certain shipments through Kang-soo's northern routes. Temporary access, minimal interference, compensated fairly. On paper, it was reasonable. In practice, it was a loyalty test disguised as business. Accept, and the Yakuza would know his organization could be leveraged. Refuse, and they'd take it as justification for the war they'd been preparing anyway. Either way, Yamamoto got information. "Your shipments stay out of my territory," Kang-soo said. "That's not negotiable." "Even if refusal costs you more than agreement?" "Especially then." Yamamoto smiled thin, calculating. "You've changed, Park. 3 years ago, you would have already calculated the trade-off. Territory for temporary peace. Profit for positioning." He leaned forward slightly. "Now you're acting on principle. Principle is expensive in our business." Kang-soo said nothing. Let the silence stretch. I'll be direct, Yamamoto continued. Your weakness has a name. Brown hair, works night shifts at Seoul National, drinks her coffee black, with too much sugar. He paused. Jane Mitchell, American citizen, no family in Korea, no protection except what you provide. There it was, the real favor, the actual test. You're telling me this because you want me to know you've been watching. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand what happens next. Yamamoto's voice stayed calm, almost gentle. You can give me the roots. Clean, simple, temporary. And Miss Mitchell continues her life uninterrupted. Or you can refuse, and will be forced to demonstrate that your personal attachments represent organizational vulnerability. Kang-soo felt the old coldness settle in, the same feeling he'd had at 19, watching his father's associates decide whether a teenager could hold an empire together. They'd tested him then, too. He'd answered with violence that made headlines for 3 weeks. But this wasn't the same. This was about Jane, and threatening Jane meant they'd studied him long enough to know it mattered. If you touch her, you'll do what? Yamamoto interrupted softly. Start a war? Over a nurse? He shook his head. That's not strategy, Park. That's proof you're compromised. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows. She's not part of this, Kang-soo said. The moment you let her see you, she became part of it. Yamamoto crushed his cigarette out, slowly, deliberately. The moment you kept seeing her after your mother's diagnosis, you made her part of it. The moment you stationed Minho's men to watch her apartment, yes, we noticed you confirmed she's not just noise, she's leverage. Kang-soo's hands stayed flat on the table, steady, controlled, but something in his chest felt like it was compressing. How long do I have to decide? 3 days. After that, we'll interpret silence as refusal. Yamamoto stood, adjusting his jacket. I don't want war, Park. War is expensive and unpredictable. But if you force my hand by choosing sentiment over survival, I'll make sure everyone in Seoul knows exactly why your organization fell apart. He walked toward the door, then paused. Your father would have given me the roots without hesitation. He understood that power requires sacrifice. Yamamoto glanced back. Maybe that's why he died respected. And why you might die loved. The door closed. Kang-soo sat alone in the empty restaurant. Rain hammering the windows, neon bleeding through the glass. His phone buzzed. Text from Minho. Asterisk. She's safe. Home. Unaware. Asterisk. Kang-soo stared at the message. Jane had no idea what had just been negotiated over her life. No idea that her existence had become a tactical problem his enemies were solving in real time. He could end this. Walk away from her. Make it clear she meant nothing. Remove the vulnerability. It's what his father would have done. It's what Yamamoto expected him to do. Slow breath. It's what every part of his training, his experience, his survival instinct demanded. His phone buzzed again. This time, Jane, asterisk. Your mother wants to see you tomorrow morning. Early. She says it's important. Asterisk. Kang-soo closed his eyes. His mother had maybe 5 days left, and she was spending them orchestrating his emotional reckoning. She'd probably planned this timing too. Probably knew exactly when the Yakuza would move. He typed back, asterisk, I'll be there, asterisk. Then he opened another message. Minho, asterisk, we need to talk. Now, asterisk. The response came immediately, asterisk. Your place or mine, asterisk. Asterisk, neutral. The warehouse in Shangsu. Asterisk. Asterisk. 20 minutes. Asterisk. Kang-soo stood, left cash on the table, old habit, even though no one was coming to collect it, and walked out into the rain. Behind him, in the empty restaurant, Yamamoto's cigarette still smoldered in the crystal ashtray. The favor hadn't been rejected yet, but the test had already revealed its answer. The call came at 4:47 a.m. Kang Soo was still awake, sitting in his apartment overlooking the Han River, when his phone lit up with Minho's number. No words exchanged, just the address of a hospital parking garage in Mapo and the sound of his second-in-command's controlled breathing. He arrived in 12 minutes. The scene was clean. Too clean. A single body, face down, near a concrete pillar. Rain from the open garage mixing with blood that was already starting to wash toward a drain. One of his own men, Ki-won, mid-30s, reliable, married with 2 daughters, shot twice, close range, execution style. Minho stood nearby, hands in his coat pockets. 3 other men formed a perimeter, watching the street. Security footage? Kang Soo asked. Erased. Professional. Minho's voice was flat. They left him here deliberately. Wanted us to find him like this. Yakuza? Their signature. But the timing. Minho paused. Ki-won was stationed outside Miss Mitchell's building tonight. He called in at 4:15 a.m. Everything normal. By 4:40, he was dead. Kang Soo felt something cold and sharp lock into place. Not panic. Worse. Clarity. Where is she? Safe. I pulled her the moment I got the call. She's at your mother's hospital. Secured wing. Guarded. Minho turned to face him. She doesn't know yet. Thinks we're being cautious because of your mother's condition. Kang Soo walked closer to Ki-won's body. The man had worked for him for 8 years. Never questioned orders. Never asked for special treatment. Just showed up, did his job, went home to his family. Now he was dead in a parking garage because Kang Soo had let someone matter. They're sending a message, Minho said quietly. This isn't about territory or roots. They're demonstrating what happens when you prioritize civilians over organization. I know what they're doing. Do you? Minho's tone sharpened. Because from where I'm standing, they just killed one of our men to prove Jane Mitchell is a vulnerability, and you're about to prove them right by reacting emotionally instead of strategically. Kang Soo looked at him. Really looked. Minho's expression was controlled, but underneath concern. Not for the organization. For him. What would you do? Kang Soo asked. Truthfully? Minho's jaw tightened. I'd remove the vulnerability. Send her back to America. Make it public. Make sure everyone knows she meant nothing. He paused. Then I'd burn the Yakuza's operations to the ground for touching what's mine. She's not an object. To them, she is. To everyone watching, she is. Minho stepped closer, voice dropping. And the longer you pretend otherwise, the more men like Ki-won die. To prove a point you refuse to accept. Sirens echoed in the distance. They had maybe 3 minutes before they needed to disappear. Kang Soo's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Mr. Park. Yamamoto's voice, smooth and unhurried. I assume you've discovered our response to your silence. Ki-won had nothing to do with this. Neither does Miss Mitchell. But here we are. A pause. You have 2 days now. The routes or escalation. I trust this clarifies the stakes. The line went dead. Kang Soo stood in the parking garage, rain falling through the open side, washing blood toward the drain, and felt something shift. Not fear, not even anger, something colder, more final. He turned to Minho. Get me everything on Yamamoto's operation. Shipments, safe houses, personnel, everything. We're going to war? We're going to end this. Kang Soo's voice stayed level. Quietly. Completely. No negotiation. Minho studied him. And Jane? She stays protected. Non-negotiable. That's the vulnerability they're exploiting. I know. Kang Soo met his eyes. Let them think it's weakness. Let them commit. Then we'll show them what it actually costs. For a long moment, Minho said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They left Kiwan's body for the authorities. Anonymous tip, clean scene, nothing traceable. By the time police arrived, Kang Soo was already at the hospital, walking through sterile corridors toward the secured wing where Jane waited. She stood when she saw him, confusion and concern mixing in her expression. What's happening? Minho said there was a security issue, but he wouldn't. Someone died tonight because of me. Kang Soo's voice was steady. Because of us. And there will be more, unless I handle this correctly. Jane's face went still. Who died? One of my men, Ki-won. He was protecting you. The words landed like a physical blow. Jane sat down slowly, hands trembling slightly. Protecting me from what? From people who want to use you to control me. Then let them. Her voice was quiet but firm. If my existence is causing people to die, then remove me from the equation. Send me home. Make it clear I don't matter. You do matter. Then people will keep dying. Jane looked up at him, eyes red but dry. That's the choice, isn't it? Your world or me. You can't have both. Kang Soo crouched in front of her, meeting her eye level. My father made that choice, chose power over everything, died alone in a hospital bed, surrounded by people who respected him, and no one who loved him. He paused. I watched him realize, right at the end, that he'd traded his entire life for a reputation that wouldn't outlive him by 6 months. So what are you saying? I'm saying I'm not my father. His voice stayed steady. I'm saying I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to end this threat. And I'm not going to apologize for choosing both. Jane studied his face for a long moment. People will call that weakness. Let them. Your enemies will exploit it. They'll try, Brayden. And if it costs you everything? Kang Soo stood, pulled her up with him, kept her hands in his. Then at least I'll know what everything was worth. Outside, dawn was breaking over Seoul. Somewhere across the city, Yamamoto was probably receiving confirmation that his message had been received. He just didn't know what Kang Soo's answer would be yet. Neither did Kang Soo's own organization. But Jane did. She saw it in his eyes, in the way he stood, in the simple fact that he was still here instead of walking away. In his world, that was more dangerous than any declaration of war. His mother died on a Tuesday morning while Jane held her hand and Kang Soo stood at the window watching rain fall on Seoul. No final words, no dramatic goodbye, just a slow exhale, a flatline tone, and the terrible silence that followed. The kind of silence that meant something permanent had shifted. Minho attended the funeral. So did 47 members of the organization, dressed in black, speaking in quiet voices about respect and legacy. Not one of them mentioned Jane, who stood beside Kang Soo throughout the service, hand resting lightly on his arm. But they all saw her. And, more importantly, the Yakuza saw her. The unraveling started small. First, 2 of his lieutenants requested reassignment. Personal reasons, they claimed. Though everyone knew what it meant, they were distancing themselves before the inevitable collapse. When you've been in the underworld long enough, you develop instincts for which ships are sinking. Then a shipment disappeared. Not stolen, just never arrived. The kind of thing that happens sometimes. Except it happened to 3 shipments in 1 week. Someone was applying pressure, making things difficult, testing response time. Rooms that used to fill when he entered started emptying. Not obviously, not dramatically, just people remembering urgent business elsewhere. Meetings that used to happen immediately now required scheduling. Respect remained, but the texture of it changed. Minho noticed, said nothing for 5 days. Then, finally, in Kang Soo's apartment, after midnight, they're repositioning. I know. Some of them are already talking to the Yakuza, exploring options. I know that too. And you're letting it happen. Minho's frustration finally broke through. You're sitting here watching your organization fracture because you won't do the one thing that would fix it. Kang Su poured whiskey. Didn't offer Minho any his second in command, didn't drink during crisis, old habit. You think sending Jane away would fix this? I think removing the visible vulnerability would stop the bleeding. Yes. Minho walked to the window. They're not leaving because they doubt your capability. They're leaving because they can't predict you anymore. You've introduced chaos into a system that requires absolute certainty. Love isn't chaos. In our world, Minho turned expression hard. It absolutely is. The words hung between them. True, both of them knew. Devastating, also true. Your father. My father died empty. Kang Su's voice stayed calm. Everything he built collapsed within 3 years. Everyone he trusted scattered the moment he showed weakness. And in his final days, the only person who visited him was my mother, the person he'd spent 40 years treating like furniture. He paused. You want me to repeat that pattern? I want you to survive it. By becoming him? By recognizing that sentiment has no place in structural power. Minho's voice dropped. You can love her, Sue. After. When things are stable. When the threats are neutralized. But right now, publicly, you need to choose the organization. Kang Su sipped his whiskey. Let the burn settle. What if I don't? The question landed like a grenade. Minho stared at him. Then I'll watch you lose everything. And I'll probably lose everything alongside you. A pause. Is that what you want? Your loyalty test? I'm not testing your loyalty. Then what are you doing? Kang Su set down his glass. Looked at his oldest ally, his most trusted operator, the man who'd stood beside him through 15 years of violence and expansion. I'm asking if you believe power requires emptiness, or if there's a version where it doesn't. Minho's jaw worked. He looked away, toward the city lights spreading below them. I don't know, he admitted finally. I've never seen it done differently. Neither have I. So we're improvising. Minho's voice carried something between disbelief and dark humor. In the middle of a gang war, with the Yakuza positioning to absorb our territory, while our own people are quietly interviewing for their next positions. Yes, that's insane. Probably. Slow breath. Your mother would have loved this. Minho shook his head. She spent your whole life trying to make you choose differently than your father. Looks like she succeeded. The observation hit harder than it should have. His mother's last words, 2 days before she died, half-conscious but still determined. Asterisk. Don't let them make you empty, Sue. Power without love is just slow dying. Asterisk. The Yakuza moved their timeline up, Minho said, shifting back to business. Yamamoto wants a meeting. Tomorrow. He's calling it final negotiations. But we both know what it really is. End quote. Head up previa zero. End quote. You can testimeus matter comtu. I'm Inamoto. End quote. An ultimatum, or an ambush. Both, probably. Kang Su stood. Set it up. Neutral location. Full security protocols. You're actually going. Of course I'm going. To say what? That you're rejecting their terms? That you're choosing Jane over organizational stability? They'll take that as permission to move openly. Good. Kang Su's voice went cold, the tone Minho recognized from 15 years ago, when a 19-year-old had walked into a room full of men who thought youth meant weakness. Let them commit. Let them show their hand completely. And then? Then I'll show them what conviction actually costs. Minho studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled sharp and dangerous. You've been planning this. Since the parking garage. You let them think you were fracturing. Let your own people doubt you. Let the Yakuza believe they'd broken your resolve. Minho's smile widened. You magnificent, manipulative bastard. I learned from watching my father fail. Kang Su walked to the window. He tried to control everything through fear. But fear requires constant reinforcement, constant demonstration. It's exhausting, unsustainable. He paused. Conviction only requires one demonstration. And Jane? She's the demonstration. Kang Su's reflection in the glass looked calm, certain, not of weakness, of what I'm willing to protect, of where my boundaries actually are. Outside, Seoul glittered with lights and rain and possibility. Tomorrow, Yamamoto would learn what it meant to mistake love for vulnerability. Tomorrow, Kang Su's organization would see what their leader looked like when he stopped pretending emptiness was strength. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, Kang Su called Jane. Hey, she answered, voice soft with late-night quiet. Hey, you okay? Not yet. He closed his eyes. But I will be. Promise? Voice tightens. Yes. The warehouse in Siacho hadn't been used for legitimate business in a decade. Kang Su arrived at 2 a.m. with Minho and 8 men. Yamamoto was already there, flanked by 12, which told Kang Su everything about how this was supposed to end. You didn't bring 12 men to a negotiation. You brought 12 men to a demonstration. The space was vast, empty except for rusted shipping containers and the kind of shadows that swallowed sound. Overhead lights created circles of visibility in an ocean of darkness, perfect for an ambush. Perfect for what Yamamoto had planned. Terrible for what Kang Su had prepared. You came. Yamamoto stood in the center pool of light, hands relaxed, expression calm. The confidence of someone who'd already won and was just collecting evidence. I admire the commitment, even if it's misguided. Kang Su stopped 10 feet away, didn't sit, didn't posture, just stood, present and still. You wanted final negotiations. I wanted closure. Yamamoto lit a cigarette. You've had weeks to make the obvious choice. Remove the girl, give us the roots, preserve your organization. Simple mathematics. He exhaled smoke. Instead, you've let your empire fracture, your lieutenants scatter, and your reputation crumble. All for a nurse who, by the way, still doesn't fully understand what you are. She understands enough. Does she? Does she know about the shipping container in Busan 3 years ago? The journalist who asked too many questions? The reason Councilman Park suddenly retired? Yamamoto smiled. Love requires honesty, Park. You're not capable of it. Kang Su said nothing. Let the words dissipate into the warehouse's vast emptiness. Here's what happens now. Yamamoto continued. You agree to our terms. Transfer the northern routes, publicly distance yourself from Miss Mitchell, and re-establish your organization under joint oversight. He paused. In exchange, we allow you to continue operating. Diminished, but intact. And if I refuse, then we take the roots. We take your territory, and we make sure everyone knows it happened because you chose sentiment over survival. Yamamoto's voice stayed conversational. Your reputation dies. Your organization dissolves. And Miss Mitchell spends the rest of her life wondering if you died empty like your father, or if she was the reason you lost everything. The cigarette's ember glowed red in the darkness. That's your final offer? That's reality. Yamamoto spread his hands. I'm not enjoying this, Park. I actually respected what you built, but you've forced this outcome by refusing to accept basic operational logic. Kang Su glanced at Minho. His second-in-command's expression was unreadable, but his posture was ready, alert. You're right about one thing, Kang Su said quietly. This has been forced. He pulled out his phone, pressed one button. The warehouse's secondary lights blazed on. Suddenly, the shadows disappeared. The darkness lifted, and in the circles of new visibility, positioned around every entrance, on every catwalk, covering every angle 40 men, armed, waiting, silent. Not Kang-Soo's men. Well, not just his men. The lieutenants who'd requested reassignment present. The operators who'd distanced themselves present. Even Kiwon's brother, who'd publicly blamed Kang-Soo for his death present. All of them positioned exactly where they'd been told to be. All of them waiting for the signal they'd been promised. Yamamoto's 12 suddenly looked very small. "You let us think you were fracturing," Yamamoto said slowly, understanding dawning. "You let your own people appear to doubt you. I let you commit." Kang-Soo's voice stayed level. "I let you position your people, expose your resources, reveal your strategy. I let you believe conviction was weakness." He paused. "You were wrong. This is still suicide. You start a war here, and this isn't war." Kang-Soo walked forward. "This is a demonstration." Minho moved simultaneously, phone already out. Whatever signal he sent caused movement outside vehicles arriving. More men. The sound of perimeters locking down. "Those shipments you diverted?" Minho said conversationally. "We let you take them, tracked them. Now we know every safe house, every depot, every piece of infrastructure you've built in Seoul over the last 6 months." He smiled. "We're already inside them, right now, waiting." Yamamoto's calm fractured. Just slightly, just enough. "You're bluffing." "Call them," Kang-Soo suggested. "Your operations in Yongsan, Gangnam, Mapo. Call them and see who answers." For 5 seconds, nothing moved. Then, Yamamoto pulled out his phone, dialed, listened. The voice that answered was one of Kang-Soo's lieutenants. Yamamoto tried another number. Same result. A third, same. He lowered the phone slowly. "This is unsustainable," Kang-Soo finished. "For you, not me." He stepped closer. "You thought love made me weak. You thought protecting Jane meant I'd lost my edge. You were so convinced that sentiment and power couldn't coexist that you forgot to consider what happens when they do. Which is clarity." Kang-Soo's voice went cold. "I know exactly what I'm protecting now. I know exactly what I'm willing to do. And unlike my father, unlike you, I'm not fighting to preserve emptiness. I'm fighting to preserve something that actually matters. Philosophical victory doesn't change tactical reality." "Here's tactical reality," Minho interrupted. "Right now, your organization in Seoul is under our control. We can dismantle it piece by piece, or you can withdraw, completely, permanently. Take your operations back to Tokyo and never move against us again. And if we refuse, then tomorrow morning," Kang-Soo said quietly, "every law enforcement agency in Seoul receives detailed information about your trafficking routes, your money laundering operations, and the names of every official you've corrupted. Simultaneously, every rival organization you've ever betrayed receives your operational details and current vulnerabilities." He paused. "We won't destroy you. We'll just make sure everyone else does." Yamamoto stared at him. The math was simple, brutal, and complete. Fight and lose everything. Withdraw and preserve distant operations. Those were the only options left. "You're risking everything for a woman who'll leave you the moment she fully understands what you are." "Maybe." Kang-Soo's expression didn't change. "But that's my risk to take, not yours." For a long moment, the warehouse stayed silent. 40 men watching, 12 men surrounded. 2 leaders facing each other with the weight of organizational futures balanced between them. Finally, Yamamoto crushed his cigarette under his heel. We withdraw. Full territorial separation. No retaliation. His voice was steady, professional, but understand, this doesn't end. Someday, that conviction you're so proud of will cost you. And when it does, we'll remember this moment. So will I. Yamamoto nodded to his men. They moved toward the exit, slowly, hands visible, weapons holstered, professionals recognizing when the math had changed. At the door, Yamamoto paused. Your father would have handled this differently. I know, Kang-Soo said. That's why you lost. The door closed. The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of rain starting outside. Minho approached, expression caught between relief and something like awe. Did we just win by being emotionally honest? We won by being willing to risk everything on something that mattered. Kang-Soo turned to face his assembled men, the ones who'd pretended to doubt, who'd played their roles perfectly, who trusted him enough to look weak publicly. Thank you, all of you. What you did tonight required more courage than any battle. One by one, they nodded. Some smiled. They'd seen their leader choose love and still win. That would be the story told in quiet rooms and late-night conversations. Not weakness, conviction. Kang-Soo's phone buzzed. Jane. Asterisk. Your mother's funeral portrait arrived at my place. I think they delivered to the wrong address. Should I bring it by? Asterisk. He typed back. Asterisk. I'll come get it. Need to talk anyway. Asterisk. Asterisk. Everything okay? Asterisk. Asterisk. Yes. Finally. Asterisk. Asterisk. Good. I made coffee. The kind you pretend not to like. Asterisk. Kang-Soo smiled, pocketed his phone, looked at Minho. Handle the cleanup. Make sure our positions are reinforced. And Minho? He paused. Thank you for believing this could work differently. I still don't know if it can, Minho admitted. But tonight at least, it did. Kang-Soo walked out of the warehouse into rain that felt clean and cold and new. Soul stretched around him, territory held, organization intact, reputation transformed rather than destroyed. His father had built an empire on fear and died surrounded by respect and loneliness. Kang-Soo had risked that empire on love and walked away with both power and the possibility of not dying empty. The cost had been vulnerability, public honesty about what mattered, the willingness to let enemies see his actual boundaries. Most men in his position would call that weakness. Most men in his position were wrong. He drove through rain-slicked streets toward Jane's apartment in Seodaemon, where lights were on and coffee was waiting, and someone saw him fully without requiring him to be less. His phone buzzed one more time. Minho. Kiwon's family received the compensation. Also, a trust fund for his daughters. They wanted me to tell you thank you. It doesn't bring him back. No. But it means his death protected something real that matters to them. Kang-Soo parked outside Jane's building, looked up at her window, saw her silhouette moving inside, probably organizing the funeral portrait, probably worried about him even though he'd said he was fine. The rain continued to fall on Seoul. Somewhere across the city, the Yakuza was withdrawing. Somewhere in his organization, the story was already changing from the boss who chose a woman over power to the boss who expanded what power could protect. And here, in this moment, Kang-Soo Park, son of a man who died empty, inheritor of an empire built on fear, chose to walk upstairs and drink coffee and be fully seen. 1. Pause. Not because it was strategic, not because it optimized anything, but because some costs, he'd learned, were worth paying. Some vulnerabilities were worth protecting. And some victories looked less like domination and more like coming home to someone who'd chosen to stay despite knowing everything. He got out of the car, walked through rain toward her door. And for the first time in 15 years, voice tightens, didn't wonder what power would cost him next. He already knew, and he'd chosen to pay it anyway.